North Carolina, huh? Right. Two familiar faces, two familiar names going to one familiar destination that we could have all predicted at one point. And then the other one, of course, is completely out of nowhere. Appreciate you stopping by for the Voice of College Football, the college football show. And here we are with it's that season, of course, Black Sunday after the final day of the regular season. And now we've got two more big coaching splashes that we are going to get to over the next few minutes. We invite your comments and questions. Leave the super chats available. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App are actually the most effective ways to contribute here at the Voice of College Football, or without spending a penny, the Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Use the Amazon link. It's Christmas time. When you're online shopping on Amazon, please use the link that we provide. It's the same shopping experience. Doesn't cost you a penny. You contribute to the Voice of College Football. It's the simple way. And again, it's instantaneous for you. You will see absolutely no difference. So before we take some calls on this topic, we want to set the stage, of course. So let's go to the articles in regards to the Belichick and Rodriguez hirings. I want to make sure that we're here and everybody can hear us. Had a comment here that we can't be heard. Can we be heard? Please let me know. There, by all indications, we are good to go. So certainly let me know in the comments section if we have any kind of technical difficulties. And let's start with Bill Belichick to North Carolina. So this is quite interesting here with Belichick. Of course, it is. It's fascinating. 5-year contract. He's 73 years old. So my first thought is that, this is arguably the greatest NFL coach of all time. Arguably. He's certainly the most accomplished during the Super Bowl era. So he goes to North Carolina. Of course, we just got through a situation where North Carolina had a 2019 through 24, whatever that is, a 6-year run with Mac Brown, who's about the same age and was hired at the age of 68. And that was a bit curious at the time. But Mac Brown, of course, elevated North Carolina immediately, which only won 5 games the previous 2 years under Larry Fedora, to a status in the ACC, went to an Orange Bowl, looked like they were going to be a major player in the conference, went to an ACC championship game, but basically leveled off. And Mac Brown was an 8-5 coach at North Carolina when it was all said and done. Things leveled off, and he wanted to come back for 2025. They did not want him anymore, and I can certainly understand why. But programs usually pivot right off of that. Is what typically happens is programs pivot right off of that. And if you've got a certain style coach, let's say you got an offensive guru, things don't work out, you go defense, or you go for the big splash hire, the big name, and an older guy, in this case with Mac Brown, you pivot and think, okay, we want the next hotshot group of 5 guy that's going to be here for 10 or 15 years and really build this and, energize everyone. No, they went with another old guy in Bill Belichick. Sorry to call you old, Bill, but you're actually doing well at the age of 72. So we're not going to read this entire article. Certainly, we'll just go through the high points, and we're going to skip everything that pretty much any football fan knows about Bill Belichick in particular. And also keep in mind that there's this odd tie-in with his son. So we'll know more about that certainly as the days unfold, and we see the news conference with Bill Belichick, because of course he should be asked about that if the North Carolina media is doing its job. One of the most stunning and compelling moves in college football history. That's a bit overstated at this point, but sure. 6-time Super Bowl winning coach Bill Belichick named the new head coach at North Carolina Wednesday night. 5-year deal. Emergency meeting by the board of trustees to approve. That's a formality for the most part. Belichick, 72. Of course, he's been in the NFL since 1975 as an assistant coach, one of the great defensive coordinators of all time, going into the Cleveland Browns head coaching stint, the New England Patriots, fired after 2023. So he's missed no football. Fired after the 23 season. Yes, so he's missed a season of football. Okay, Belichick's father was on the UNC staff from 1953 to 55. Quote, I grew up around college football, et cetera, et cetera. Always wanted to be a college coach. Look forward to building the football program in Chapel Hill. You know, North Carolina, despite developing and producing a top 10 level of NFL players, like North Carolina is in that top 10 to 15 range in regards to NFL products. The winning itself, although somewhat consistent, North Carolina has been a fairly consistent winner through the years, certainly under Mack Brown. They've not won a conference championship, and we're not talking about one of the best conferences. Not won an ACC title since 1980, Lawrence Taylor. So what else do we have here? For a program awash in apathy and mediocrity, this marks a distinct and compelling shift from Mack Brown. So very different personalities here. You would expect Bill Belichick to be hard driving. So if this was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and an accomplished NFL coach was coming back to college coaching, let's say late in his career, late in his life, not that we're projecting any kind of demise for Bill Belichick. He could live to be 100, but obviously this being at the dusk of a person's life, that he might be viewing this as, oh, I want to still be active. I want to be coaching football. I enjoy the excitement of the game, the camaraderie, all those things involved in building something and competitive fire and all that. But it's a step back from the competition in the NFL. And I could just have a nice little college football program and a nice little sleepy college football town, and we can do fine. But transfer portal, NIL now to deal with, it's a bigger headache than an NFL job, in my opinion, by far. I would much rather be an NFL coach today than a college football coach. All right, so UNC athletic director Bubba Cunningham says that hiring Belichick positions the program well amid the changing landscape of college sports. So they're going to drive it hard. Apparently, he's a football legend, represents a new approach, will ensure Carolina football can evolve, compete, and win. Obviously, Bill Belichick understands salary cap, being not that he was the general manager, but certainly highly involved, having a ton of influence there. And, the question has been raised about him dealing with student athletes. We'll get to that in just a second. Former NFL executive Michael Lombardi, I think we know that name, also an assistant under Belichick with the Patriots from 2014 to 16, said Wednesday night that he would serve as the general manager of the Tar Heels program. There you go. You've got your general manager. We won't go through Belichick's accomplishments. We know that, again, Mack Brown, nice stint at North Carolina, not nearly as successful as his first stint. The thing I will say about Mack Brown, number one, he always approached everything as a gentleman and a individual. Apparently, I cannot think of anything in particular in which Mack Brown ever got in trouble for, ever showed himself to be an embarrassment or a black mark on the sport at all. Class individual, and we're going back 30 years plus. And from a coaching standpoint, Mack Brown always left every major situation much better than where he found it. First time at North Carolina, they were a mess. They were a wreck. He elevated it to top 10 status his last couple of years, then went to Texas. Texas was a mess for the entirety of the 1990s for the most part. He elevated Texas to national championship status. Of course, won one, got to a BCS championship game, basically lived in the top 5 to 10 in the country, left Texas. Of course, they are just now recovering in the last couple of years after his departure. Same thing at North Carolina. They were a mess. He left them much better, albeit not to the point that he did the first time. 6-6 this past year. Yeah, Brown's syrupy Southern charm. Very different personalities, as we talked about. Bill Belichick, seems aloof. I think he seems a little bit more human than he used to. And let's see if we've got anything else in here about his son. Okay. Returning to coaching in general had been paramount for Belichick. He spent a lot of time around his former assistant, Washington head coach Jed Fish, talking to friends and former assistant coaches around college football. Belichick's son, Steven, of course, he's the Washington defensive coordinator, is expected to be involved with the North Carolina staff in some way. And again, we will find out more in regards to the sticking part of this was, will Belichick demand that his son take over the program? And there we see that at 72 years old, Bill Belichick is now the oldest head coach in the FBS. Kirk Ferentz, 69 at Iowa. Casey Wheeler takes over in 2025 at Temple at the age of 65. And Kyle Whittingham says he will be back in 2025 at the age of 65. And of course, Bill Belichick, we talk about college football coaches who are able to flash championship rings, and then they've got that automatic advantage over anybody else. Dabo Swinney walks in a room. In the past, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, they flash national championship rings, instant credibility, instant draw to any college football player, high school football player in the country, and now college football player because you're recruiting transfer portal guys. This is a whole other level in many aspects. A lot of people, a lot of young kids, you'll see this with the demographics and obviously just the sheer popularity of the NFL, which overshadows college football. And many of you don't want to hear this. And many of you just watch college football, love college football, don't care about the NFL. But the fact is that the NFL is immensely more popular than college football. Therefore, a lot of these athletes grow up watching the NFL, don't care about college football, and they get into the recruiting process and they start to warm up to college football and the names and the big coaches. But when you can flash Super Bowl rings, everybody knows who Bill Belichick is, even if you have no other ties to college football. And then we've got the names that emerged in the search. That doesn't matter right now. So that's it for Bill Belichick, and we will take your calls if we've got anyone on the line at this point. We got to, of course, honor the Super Chat contributions. First and foremost, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you so much for that, Adam. And again, we'll take your comments and questions. Just leave those in the chat. Mark, successful college football coaches often struggle to replicate that success in the NFL. That has happened many times. Absolutely. Do you think the same might be true for NFL coaches transitioning to college football? Well, the thing I will say is that college football is much more like the NFL than it ever has been, ever. Ever. It's more like the NFL. Your best players, so if you want to be coaching a elite program, your best players are much more NFL minded than they've ever been. Not that they weren't thinking in 1980, hey, I want to make the NFL, but now it's basically business decision. Get me to the NFL. Make me as much money as I can possibly make here, but I'm that good that I want development toward the NFL. And I'm so good that I can go anywhere and I'll get drafted in the 5th or 6th round, or I'll be able to make an NFL team, but develop me to be a higher draft pick and make a whole lot more money. So in regards to, and we'll get to this with Rich Rodriguez in just a second, because obviously that's a whole other dynamic that's fascinating about this. Both of these are unique in so many different ways. So yes, you're dealing with, number one, much younger people, and the difference between a 17-year-old kid and a 25-year-old man is much different. Trying to keep these guys on the straight and narrow, 105 of them, or whatever it turns out to be, when we have some changes to roster dynamics as we are expected to have. But man, keeping them eligible, keeping them in class, and again on the straight and narrow versus what you deal with in the NFL. If you have an issue in the NFL, if somebody runs amok of the law, does something stupid in the NFL, what's the head coach have to do with it? He's got to bear the brunt of trying to replace the guy, of trying to figure out, oh, we just lost our best edge rusher, trying to figure out the scheme and the dynamics and all of that. But that's completely dealt with by the league. It's a league matter. It's totally off his plate. Based on his level of influence, he may have a say in trying to influence an outcome, but that's taken out of his hands. College football, these coaches have a lot more power. They've got more power than anyone in the state and make more money. All right, Adam, appreciate you being here. Let's take our first call. We've got Anthony on the line. Anthony, what's going on?
Hey, Mark. How are you today?
I am doing just fine. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Mark, I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but this seems like incompetence at the highest level that Bubba Cunningham and the administration at North Carolina hired Bill Belichick, who has no experience in college football whatsoever, to coach, because you agree with me that college football and the NFL in terms of coaching is two different animals, correct? Am I
talking
correct
about coaching a team on the field preparing for game day? Or are we talking about running an organization?
Both.
If we're talking about coaching football, the games, the two sports have never been so aligned. If we're talking about X's and O's.
Oh, no, the organization part, the dealing with the political administration, because let's be honest, I don't think Carolina really cares about football. Like, let's be honest, they're a basketball school. They've had good seasons, but I don't think the administration really cares about the football program.
Okay. I kind of touched on this before, and this is my thought about that. When you've got somebody that's got as many accomplishments as Bill Belichick and makes as much money as he does, he's not wanting for income. He's not wanting for anything like that. He's got a desire to coach again. And so either he's in the category of, I'm kicking back, I'm still competitive, and I still want a job. I'm bored. I'm not doing TV. I want to be around football players, coaches, all of that. And this is but I'm not going to put a whole lot into this. And, hopefully we win games, but yeah, I'm not going to be a hard driver here, but that's not his DNA. Plus, with the NIL and with the transfer portal, it's such a more complicated job than it's ever been. I can't.
That's what I'm going to bring up next.
But he's got help doing that, of course. Like but
he's got
a general manager.
His best friend Saban left the retired from the college football because he admitted to media members that he retired because he didn't want to deal with the transfer portal or NIL. I think within the next 2 or 3 years, Belichick's going to get tired of it, because he's not going to want to negotiate NIL deals with these 17 or 18-year-old kids.
Well, hopefully he's not going to do that. Michael Lombardi's going to do that. He's going to have his influence on bringing the kids to the table and them wanting to play for him, number one. And then he's also going to have a hand in knowing that, okay, we have $25 million to work with. That left tackle is going to cost us $2 million. That's too much. We don't want him. We'll take a cheaper product there. So he's going to have those types of decisions to make in managing his roster or helping Lombardi to manage the roster. I get your point. We don't know. We don't know how invested he is, and we don't know what he asked North Carolina. We don't know that he didn't go to the table and say, I need proof, or it's not going to be proof. I need evidence that we are going to build something big here and that we are serious. I got to think it's Bill Belichick. He had those kind of conversations, that it was as much about him selling them, or probably more about him needing to be sold that North Carolina can be a football power.
But this is another question. You brought up X's and O's. Don't you think the game has passed Belichick by in terms of X's and O's? Because offenses have gotten more spread and more air raid than when he came into the NFL, which was traditional West Coast run-based offenses. So you think it's going to be a hard adjustment for him?
Why would the adjustment be any worse than it has been for anybody else? You bring up Nick Saban. Well, Nick Saban was right in the transition of it. He pivoted very effectively. He didn't like it. He acknowledged that. He didn't like where the game was headed. But Bill Belichick was just coaching winning teams 2 or 3 years ago. He's not been that far removed from being successful at the NFL level.
I didn't know this. I didn't know Bill Walsh went to Stanford.
Yeah, so this is something we were going to bring up, but that's more related to the Rich Rod, of college football coaches that have gone back to their original. Yes, Bill Walsh was the coach at Stanford twice. So we were going to go to that. It seems like a lot of people want to talk about Rich Rodriguez, and maybe that's why we've lost some viewers here, because people want to talk about Rich Rodriguez. I was leading with Bill Belichick and then going to go into Rich Rod. It's obviously two huge.
Honestly, that's going to be a disaster.
That's going to be a disaster. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I honestly, they should have went. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with West Virginia. After Rich Rod left the first time, it seems like they've had issues finding a coach. Maybe it's because they wanted the coach to be a carbon copy of Rich Rod. That's why the coaches have failed and stuff like that. Do you think that that's the issue with West Virginia? Maybe that they've hired coaches and they wanted them to be almost a carbon copy of a Rich Rodriguez, and that's why they failed? Or,
well, I will say that Dana Hogerson obviously majors on the offensive side of the football, just like Rich Rodriguez, but their offensive styles and systems are vastly different. So they weren't trying to replicate Rich Rodriguez from that standpoint, but they got Dana Hogerson, who generally runs a pretty high fly, up tempo, spread them out kind of thing, even though the running game
after Dana, because Neil Brown, I think, comes from the Rich Rod, the same mentality. That's what I'm saying. After guys like Neil Brown seem like they come from more of the Rich Rod system of coaching than Dana Holgerson and stuff like that.
I think we focused a little bit too much on who has an updated offense and who doesn't. When you watch these college football games, my goodness, everybody's offense almost looks identical unless you're at a certain few different locations.
The Big Ten is more run-based, you have to admit.
In certain locations, it is. Did you happen to watch the Big Ten championship game?
Oh, yeah, the Oregon-Penn State game?
Yeah.
That was high-flying. I agree with you.
Yeah, did you watch the Big Ten championship game versus watching the SEC championship game? I think a lot of people's stereotypes are breaking down quite a bit over the last 5+ years. And we just assume, well, the Big 8 or the Big 12 doesn't play defense, and all the quarterbacks are great, but the defenses are horrible. The SEC's like this, the Big Ten's like this, the Big Ten's just slug it out. Well, they still slug it out at Wisconsin, or at not even Wisconsin. They slug it out at Iowa. They slug it out at Rutgers. They slug it out at Minnesota. Yes, absolutely. The run game is more prominent at more Big Ten schools, but the Big Ten schools that don't play like that.
Would you say Michigan's in that what is it called?
They kind of forced themselves into that spot this year. Yes, absolutely. And even under Jim Harbaugh and JJ McCarthy, they were in the bottom 15 or 20 in the country in pass attempts.
Okay, thanks for having me on, John. Mark.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate it. All right, we got Nick on the line. Welcome to the Voice of College Football.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. I was hearing
hearing your guys' conversation about Bill Belichick, and I think it's pretty interesting. I disagree with the previous caller. I actually think this could work.
I absolutely think it can work.
I will say based on how I feel about it. It obviously depends, and maybe this goes without saying. It obviously depends on Bill Belichick's mindset going into this, like how serious he is about it. I don't know the guy. I'm not going to say he's not serious because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I don't know. I mean, I actually kind of like the hire. If you're a team like North Carolina, you're talking about bringing in a guy who thrives off of structure. And right now, college football is lacking a lot of that. And it's kind of chaotic. So given the right resources, and especially with NIL today, it's less about, feeling warm towards the coach. I mean, relationships still matter, but this is a very transactional sport right now. And I think bringing him in could work from the standpoint of he's seen everything at this point. And what was Bill Belichick the best at? He wasn't great at drafting. He was elite at free agency and structuring a team together that takes maybe overlooked pieces, but when combined in a system is very effective. And he built that around an elite quarterback. So he's going to have to find a way to bring an elite quarterback. You can't escape that. But I don't know. I like the hire. I think it's interesting. And I think, again, in a sport that lacks structure in many ways, thanks to the clown show of the NCAA, I think he could be quite refreshing. And as far as the game passing him by, he was a defensive coach in the NFL. There's nothing Bill Belichick, a guy of his ilk, hasn't seen. His paycheck in the NFL was based on completely changing your defensive game plan week to week basis. Like, there's a lot more variance in the NFL, and a lot more game planning. And I don't know. I think, and the other thing too is, like, set aside Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, I mean, New England is still a small market team. Without the winning, of those two, what kind of a franchise really are they? So I don't know. I think there's quite a few things in his favor, but that's kind of my thoughts on it. What do you think of that?
Well, Nick, you bring up the defensive side of the ball, and that's obviously his specialty, and that's where he grew up. But then he became, some guys, if they're around long enough, they then master both sides of the ball. And one of the marks of Bill Belichick's teams, especially maybe his last 7 to 10 years at New England, was from a defensive standpoint for the opponent, they didn't know what team they were going to get that week. Like, he had situations with championship teams where James White was the ball carrier for that game. And based on who they were playing and the scheme that they were showing you, that he'd get 25 carries one week, and we wouldn't even see, and he'd have a great game. So you just assume, well, this is the guy, and you wouldn't even see him the next week. And they would come out with completely different personnel targets and options in the game plan, and also different sets and just a different offense in many occasions, whether they were playing the Ravens, the Steelers, fill in the blank. Especially for the better opponents, they would have a different identity from week to week. And obviously, he had some of the top offensive coordinators that moved on to head coaching jobs, but that was him determining that and driving that type of an approach.
Yeah,
which is really innovative.
Yeah, I agree, and that's factual. So that's why I don't know. I think the argument that the game has passed him by, or he's not prepared for something like that, like, I think it's actually kind of the other way. I mean, if anything, he's a little bit over prepared, and he probably just wants a new challenge. Now, it's nice with the, what was it, $30 million he's getting? So that's obviously not a small amount of money, but I don't know. I think it's kind of the opposite. I think in a sport right now that has a constant need for more structure, I think there's a lot of areas where he could take advantage of things and actually manufacture. I think he can manufacture a lot of wins with less talent than some of the other teams. Now, I think his biggest challenge is going to be the time restrictions, right? For how much time you can spend with these players. That's probably going to be one of his biggest adjustments he's going to have to make. You got to find that sweet spot. And you see it with a lot of NFL guys who come to college, right? They try to install too much. They try to do too much. You saw it with Wink Martindale this year. You saw it with Mike McDonald in Michigan in 2021. And you've seen it with a handful of other coaches. So he's going to have an adjustment there. But I think with how Wild West the NIL is, I think there's a lot of areas in college right now that he's going to be able to exploit. So I don't know. We'll see. Obviously, he can't do it all by himself. I don't know if North Carolina has other pieces, competent pieces in place to make things work. But I highly doubt Bill Belichick would be jumping into something like this if he had not identified clear paths of where he's going to have a high chance of success. So that's just fine.
People are raising questions that there's no doubt that Bill Belichick made sure that when he went to North Carolina and was negotiating, again, this is a situation where I consider it to be more of a negotiation or a hiring process where he is hiring North Carolina more so than they're hiring him. Like they are more sold on him than he is them. And he probably went in there and said, what are we going to do about this? Am I going to have this? What resources do I have here? What are we going to do about this? Et cetera, more so than them putting him on, the grilling session to figure out what he brings to the table. He flashes his Super Bowl rings, and then also just the thought of, do you hire a coach with the thought that, we want a young coach because we want to build with him and we want him to be here a long time and we foresee this long tenure. How many coaches are anywhere for more than 5 years? Look across college football, and we've got some dinosaurs from 15, 20 years ago, like Kirk Ferentz and Mike Gundy. Other than that, Kirby Smart's been around, it seems like forever, and it's been, less than 10 years. It's been 8 years. So you can't hire a guy anymore thinking that, okay, well, we've hired the next Bobby Bowden, and he's going to be here for 40 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And then lastly, I just got to get this off my chest. I don't know. I've tried to catch a couple of your more recent videos on talking about the playoffs, but it's the holiday season, so been kind of busy in and out here. But I got to be honest. I think I told you earlier this year I didn't know how I was going to like this new playoff structure. I was going to give it a chance. I hate it. I think it's stupid.
Do you hate the number of teams or the way it's formatted?
Well, don't they kind of go hand in hand in a way?
Well, sure. The format has to go along with the number of teams. Sure. But I think
less so with the number of teams. The way that this has been formatted and has worked out, I think it's a black eye. I think it's a clown show. Your number one seed has the most difficult path, it appears, to the championship game, and a team that beat essentially no one in the same conference gets the easiest path. You're just handing James Franklin, and you know how I feel about him, but this isn't even about that, but you're just handing him basically a third round opportunity. And in a tournament like this, there's going to be blowouts, but you give a team any momentum and, who knows what can happen. Now, actually, I was pretty impressed with Penn State's talent in the Big Ten championship. They're still missing an elite wide receiver. I think if they had an elite wide receiver, like you throw a Marvin Harrison Jr. on Penn State, they probably win the whole thing. But they're a very dangerous team, and now they've just been gifted. I mean, I guess it's possible they lose, but I think it's supposed to be like in the teens, right? Weather-wise, in Pennsylvania for the kickoff.
Well, we're weeks away, but yes, something like that.
So I don't know. I think it's stupid. And I guess I agree with Joel Klatt in that it appears like his reasoning was that they overvalued. They tried to make championship games matter so much that they actually diminish them as an unintended consequence. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I understand that point. I'm probably more aligned with that, but I don't know.
Two of the four meant everything. They weren't diminished. They meant everything. They were the entire season on the line. Big 12 and ACC championship games.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just wanted to get kind of like a summary or however you want to explain it. I think it's stupid. I think obviously it's likely a very temporary structure, but I've never enjoyed the issue. I've never seen so much bickering and arguing over which is the more impressive loss. Like we're talking so much about losses. Who has the better loss? And I just don't care about that. I care about wins on the field and quality wins, and the way you play is obviously an important part too, but I don't know. On-field results matter the most, and here we are sitting with a stupid structure, a joke of a playoff, if you even want to call it that. And then not only that, but people are losing their minds over who has the best third loss of the year. And that's just like, how does that not degrade the sport?
Well, we are having the same arguments that we had with a 14 playoff. It's just exponentially more because there's more teams involved and you have worse records, and therefore you have more blemishes on teams' records to dissect. You're not dissecting a bunch of 11-1, 11-2 teams or 12-1 teams like you were with a 14 playoff. It's exponentially increased. So we were having the same discussions before, but they only involved like two teams. Oh, Ohio State had this horrible loss against Purdue. Can we let them in the playoff over Oklahoma? And it was really just kind of a one-on-one type matchup. And it wasn't like, oh, we got these 6 teams and they got 3 losses and they lost to Vandy and they lost to Oklahoma and on and on and on with all these various scenarios. So I'll say it this way, that we need to separate what the committee did in their decisions versus what the format is. They don't have anything to do with the format. It's a totally different decision and committee that came up with the format and decided this is the way it's going to be. The committee, I believe, did its job. And I haven't said that every year, and I have carved this committee to shreds most of the time for a number of reasons, and I wouldn't even have a committee if I was doing it. But the committee, within the framework of what they were assigned to do, I believe did its job. Do I believe that there are 3 teams in the SEC that are better, that are of the 12 best teams in the country? Yes. But it's not about just deciding based on talent and best results on the field that they're the best teams, and therefore we're going to shove them into a playoff. Okay, I think SMU earned that spot over Alabama, South Carolina, and Ole Miss. So I think the committee's doing its job in this particular case. They screwed up some seating slots. I won't get into that right now, but they clearly screwed up some seatings. The issue is with, yes, the format. So the committee did get blindsided to a certain extent, or whoever built the format, the subcommittee that built the format, because some of the things that happened here this season are somewhat unprecedented, but could have been anticipated. One of these is that the Big 12 is not as good as it was with Oklahoma and Texas. How many of these teams in the Big 12 ever competed seriously for a college football playoff spot? Nobody outside of TCU, one time. Therefore, you remove Oklahoma and Texas, and especially Oklahoma during that 10-year run, from that situation, and you're I don't want to say gifting because they earned it, but a playoff bye and a top 4 seed to a team that really doesn't have much of a resume and is not one of the 4 best teams in the country. And then this Boise State situation, if you go over the 10-year run of the college football playoff 4-team deal and the committee's rankings, that's pretty unprecedented as well. Even UCF going undefeated, they would not have gotten a top 4 seed. Cincinnati would have once. So, and they made a 4-team field that people didn't have an issue with. So what they kind of got hit with an unprecedented situation where the Big 12 does not have elite programs. So we anticipated that to a certain extent. And the group of 5 school comes out of nowhere and has this lofty status based on basically playing Oregon as well as they did, that they gained this high ranking, which they earned. But yeah, it's created, we all knew that the 5 seed was the place to be, but it's created another path for Penn State that is a bit of a joke.
Well, it's resulted in lesser accomplished teams like Penn State in the higher tier talent or higher difficulty category to have an easier path over the teams that they lost to. And I would actually argue that, like, Boise State was gifted, that these other teams have been gifted a spot, because what advantage did, like, they're being given the same credit for the playoff structure that other teams like Oregon were given, and Oregon played a far more difficult schedule. Like Boise State playing in the Big Ten or the SEC, there's probably a good chance they don't even make the playoffs. And with the structure now, there's no accounting for that. Like, yeah, you played, like in the NFL, everyone plays everybody. In the NBA, everyone plays everybody. There's different tiers of competition. And these other teams that are getting buys are in a weaker tier, but they're getting the same benefit in the playoff structure. And no one thought that this would have to be accounted for. Like, I can't even believe that functioning human beings would not see that we were always going to end up with this if they didn't account for that difference.
Well, if the committee, or again, it's not the committee that we're familiar with, the deciders of the college football playoff format, if they did not acknowledge and recognize conference champions, which I didn't hear a whole lot of backlash to, including from myself, you would have, number one, diminished the conference championship games. They would have been completely worthless. So there would have been no use to force teams to play an extra game, and you're basically penalizing them and beating them up for no advantage except to expose themselves to a potentially embarrassing loss that would drop their ranking. So they needed to substantiate the conference championship games. The conference championship games make too much money. And with these massive conferences, we have to have some reasonable way to determine who wins conference championships. So that's becoming an issue, is determining a fair way to determine conference championships, because the conferences are too massive, and we can go to the top of every conference and see where X didn't play Y and they didn't play Z. And it's just doesn't make any sense. Plus, again, they were looking also for an objective way to, I think we're all a little uncomfortable with a seeding of just, we're going to select the 12 best teams, which they are doing right now, but they are at least forced to a criteria that acknowledges the 4 conferences. Shoot, we could have had the Big 12 completely left out of this. If it was just the rankings being the rankings and we take the top 12 teams, then we would have had one conference completely left out of it. We could have had the ACC completely left out of it and just had 2 conferences and the smattering of Notre Dame and a group of 5. Do we want that sport?
Yeah, no, I see your point. I don't know. I think this is going to be the most ridiculous, stupid ending to a college football season we've ever seen. That's my opinion. So
everyone still has to get through prominent quality opponents, top tier opponents to win a championship. But to your point, a lot of them will have to see them from day one, and others won't see them till the semifinal.
It's going to be really wonky. I think there's going to be some good games, a lot of blowouts. So I guess buckle up. But I hope I'd be fine at this point just going back to BCS, honestly, and just be done with this whole thing.
Man, don't get me started on the BCS.
Or I don't know.
So when you say the BCS, Nick, the differentiation I want to make is people get the idea that I hate the BCS, which I do, but it wasn't about the BCS so much as the limited number of teams involved. I didn't like just we're selecting one game, got two teams, because that never worked.
Yeah.
It didn't work from year to year. There were always teams on the outside that had just as good a resumes and credentials to go to a championship game.
So I think I've asked you this before. So you're for expanding it further, correct?
No, I don't want any more than 12. Okay. These teams at the bottom end, Indiana. Sorry, I know they're 11-1. Their record in other cases, if you would have told me Indiana's emerged out of the Big Ten at 11-1, I would have said, "Wow, that's amazing." Number one, number two, they must have earned it, and it's not their fault. Well, it's partially their fault. Their non-conference schedule is complete rubbish, and is again next year. Half the teams in the Big Ten should be completely ashamed of, and I'm going to do a video on this, and I'm going to lay half of these programs to waste. I looked at their 2025 schedule that was announced yesterday, and half these teams should be completely embarrassed, and people with more influence than me should expose them for being frauds and negligent in building a schedule. Indiana, Rutgers, Maryland, Minnesota in particular next year, and Indiana this year. If they had not made the playoff, I would have said, it's your fault. You needed to play somebody with a pulse in the non-conference schedule. I understand they can't control their Big Ten schedule.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that's all I got for you. I appreciate you taking my call. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. I'm sure that you're very proud of your Ohio brethren wanting to make flag planting a felony at this point. So,
well, I'm not.
I'm on board.
I'm
on board. I'm totally on board with it. Let's go full bore and make this as ridiculous as possible. Planting your flag in an opposing team's logo, even though you can't plant a flag through turf, should be. Let's just go punishable by death at this point. I mean, why not, right? Let's go full hog. Let's not mess around. So
let's do that.
Anyway, thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Nick. Oh, do I even go into this? My one-line statement would be, it's a stupid thing to do, number one. Just a stupid thing to do. You know, you're on somebody else's field. I don't care how many times you say you own their field. You don't own their field. They own their field. Celebrate, jump up and down. The after game scenario is actually meant to be a time of sportsmanship, and you go across the field just like you see after a baseball game, and they line up and they shake hands in a line. That's basically what's happened throughout the history of football. Is you have pleasantries at midfield, especially in college, where tons of these guys played with each other and against each other in high school and growing up. That's what it's been for. And jump up and down and go crazy and celebrate. But these traditions or these regimented acts of showing how great you are by planting your flag, which again, of course, you can't plant a flag on most of these fields. It's just stupid. And then the retaliation is understandable. Just so I don't condone the retaliation against it, but you can understand the retaliation. So unfortunately, nobody is behaving the way that they should. Therefore, somebody's got to get involved, because we as humans need rules. Because if we all conducted ourselves the right way, would we need any rules or laws? No, we wouldn't. But do we conduct ourselves the right way? Yes. we need rules and laws. I'm going to skip in line here because we need some West Virginia talk here. And we got Joey, we got Coos stepping in here because we got to get to Rich Rod and that situation, which I will just say one thing before we let Joey give his perspective, which is far beyond mine. And that's we've got Bill Walsh comes to mind. He was at Stanford, then, of course, at the 49ers, did a remarkable job, one of the greatest coaches of all time, got bored in the broadcast booth, comes back to Stanford, has one amazing season, then 2 losing years, and he's done. John Robinson comes to mind at USC, just barely lost a game there, national championship, Rose Bowl wins all over the place, goes to the Los Angeles Rams, comes back to USC after a nice run with the Rams, is less effective the second time, and that's what I would expect from Rich Rodriguez. The chances of him duplicating his success, I think, are somewhat low. Joey, what you got?
Hey, Mark, what's going on, babe?
Not too
I'm
much. How you
excited.
doing?
Good. I'm excited, man. It's a great hire. West Virginia needed a hire like this because we needed a splash hire. It needed to be a Jimbo Fisher or a Rich Rodriguez. I was okay with Kalanicky, or his name from Penn State. I can't never say it right. I was okay with that hire if that would have been the hire. But like yesterday when they came out with um, uh, the guy from Ohio State, Hartman.
Brian Hartline.
Heartline. Yeah, that was not been the splash hire, in my opinion, and I believe we needed it for the fan base.
You don't think that would have been a splash hire?
Not well, I think it would have for recruiting, obviously, but I don't think it would have been a splash hire for this fan base because I think a lot of the fan base wouldn't know who he was. Now,
I don't mean to jump on you there, Joey, because you are right. You know the West Virginia fan base, and you got the pulse of the West Virginia fan base. But if they've not been living under rocks, they should know who Brian Hartline is. But you're right. Rich Rodriguez resonates with the West Virginia fan base way beyond Brian Hartline. But nationally, I think people would actually take more note of Brian Hartline who follow college football.
I agree 100%. And I'm not saying it wouldn't have been a splash hire. I think it would have been a fantastic hire had they would have went with that. But I think the fan base at West Virginia needed something that they considered a splash hire, and Rich Rodriguez or Jimbo Fisher would have been that. So I think this is a great hire to bring the fan base back. Now, has it brought the fan base back? I don't know. I see a lot of division in the fan base. A lot of people didn't want him back, but I think there's more people that wanted him back than didn't. And I know you've got Coos in the back room. Coos is one of those that wanted Rich Rod back. I was okay with bringing Rich Rod back, but I really wanted a Jimbo Fisher myself. So it's a splash hire. And one thing I will say about this is when we hired Dana Holgerson back in 2012, we kind of knew what we were getting. We knew we were getting a great offensive mind, probably one of the better offensive minds in the country. And he never let us down as far as that. We always had great offense, but our defense really struggled. And then you bring on Neil Brown, and the first year in 2019, we had Big Koenig as our defensive coordinator, and we had a pretty solid defense. It really looked good. Then there was some off-field issues with Big Koenig, and he ended up getting fired. And so they bring in Jordan Leslie as defensive coordinator, and our defense has just struggled, just like they did under Dana Holgerson. So I know that Rich Rod, though, when he was there, we had a tremendous defense. He had Jeff Castile there and Tony Gibson as well as a co-defensive coordinator. So we had an amazing defense. I feel like Rich Rod will bring that defense back. I know everybody looks at him as an offensive guy, but the defense that he'll bring back to West Virginia will be our stepping point in the Big 12 to start making a splash in the Big 12 finally. That's what I believe. That's why I'm really excited about this, is that we might finally have a defense again.
I'm actually going to do something I don't normally do. I'm going to bring in Coos at the same time and get 2 in here at the same time because this is a bit different. We got 2 pros here. So Joey Foster, of course, has been a great assistant to me throughout the years here at the Voice of College Football. We got Coos' Corner. Check it out right here on YouTube, Coos' Corner. Coos, appreciate you being here. So my question to get you guys continued on this topic would be when you say some people, and I apologize, George, I cut you in line. I know I did, but we got to talk West Virginia, and these guys are the two of the best to do it. So when Joey, you say that a lot of the fan base doesn't want Rich Rodriguez back, is that because of some kind of petty bitterness of what happened 15 years ago? Or is that
Yeah,
more
it's like
about that he's not a good hire? Those are two different, they need to separate themselves from that and say, is this a good hire for 2024, 2025?
I agree. So it's like this. It's the crazy ex, right? You've got the ex that got mad at you, went and cheated on you, blamed you for everything, left you, then turned around and sued you, and now wants to come back to you. And so you know, that's how a lot of the fan base feels. And yeah, that's petty, and you have to overlook that. Sometimes it's not that kind of relationship, obviously. So you have to look at it as saying who's the better coach right now for West Virginia, and Rich Rod is probably the better coach for West Virginia right now. So I think that's why it's a great hire, and I think the rest of the fan base will come along with that, and I think Coos would agree with that.
What do you say, Coos?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I'm traveling at the moment.
We got you.
Okay. Apologize if there's any background noise, but no, yeah, I love the hire. Obviously, I couldn't be more excited. Can't lie though, some of that is nostalgia. Obviously, some of my best memories as a West Virginia fan are under Rich Rodriguez. But I think at the end of the day, when you look at the candidate pool, who was available, and the benefits of hiring each candidate, to me, Rich Rodriguez was the guy. I mean, he has Power 4 experience. Now, I know it was a while back, but he knows what it takes to win at that level. He has recent success at Jacksonville State. He knows how to recruit to West Virginia because of the culture. And I think this is probably what pushed him to the top of the list. He's going to have substantial financial backing from some of West Virginia's biggest donors that should help West Virginia be more competitive in today's landscape. You add all that together, to me, he was the guy. And yes, Joey's right. There's going to be a large portion of our fan base. There is a large portion of our fan base that doesn't like it. But I think if he starts winning games like I think he can, I think they'll all come around.
So what are reasonable expectations of what this program is in 2025 now versus years ago when Rich Rod took you guys to the brink of a national championship?
I mean, 25 for me, because it's year one, and I know everybody wants to throw out, what Cignetti's doing. Everybody wants to talk about, some of these guys who turn programs around in 1 year. I think that those are anomalies. And like back to what you were talking about earlier, Cignetti hasn't really played anybody. So realistically, I think they're a bowl team in year one because he's going to need time to build the roster the way he wants it. He's not going to recruit the same type of player that Neil Brown did. And I think in year 2 to year 3, he should be competing for, at least year 3 should be competing for Big 12 championships.
Yeah, I agree with Coos there, because if you think about the Big 12 for the last 2 years has really been kind of down. I mean, it really has. It's not been the Big 12 that it normally is. You don't see Oklahoma State losing 8, 9 games. It just doesn't happen. You don't see Kansas State dropping 3 or 4 games. You don't see teams like that doing that. You don't see teams, even like West Virginia, normally dropping 3 or 4 games and 5 games in a year, or 6 games in a year. It just doesn't happen. So the Big 12's been down, and because it's been down, West Virginia should have done much better this year than they did, because they had a lot of returning production. It should have been a much better team. Our defense really struggled, and our defense has struggled for the last 5 years under Neil Brown. It's been really, really bad. So if Rich Rod can come in and straighten up our defense, I don't think our offense needs a lot of help. We have a lot of power on offense, and we have a good recruiting class, a decent one. we maintained that recruiting class, and even Neil Brown helped keep that recruiting class in place even after he was fired. So, hats off to Neil Brown for doing that. But at the same time, Rich Rod, I've already seen big splashes being made out there in the recruiting world because I'm seeing things like 5-star wide receiver Chris Henry, possibly coming to West Virginia now. I mean, there's little things that Rich Rod can bring, and he did that when he was there before. I mean, if everybody remembers, he brought in Noel Devine. That was a huge, huge recruit. And of course Pat White and Pat McAfee, the list goes on and on and on. Pat Man Jones, all those guys that he was able to bring to West Virginia. That's what Rich Rod can bring because the culture of West Virginia under Rich Rod was amazing. It was really, really good. So if he can spark that culture again that he had back in his time, if he can spark that culture again, I feel like West Virginia in 2025 can have 8-9 wins. Now if with returning production he has, let's say Nico Marchio stays, and Nico's a big time recruit as well and a very good quarterback. Nico stays and doesn't transfer, and I think he will. I believe Nico's there for the long haul. That's going to be an outstanding quarterback in a Rich Rodriguez system. Now, he's not as fast as a Pat White, but he does have some scrambling ability. But he's deadly accurate with that ball. And so I feel like we can have a 9-win season and possibly even compete for the Big 12 next year under a Rich Rodriguez.
I'd say the other thing is it's not like this guy's in some type of old dinosaur that's been removed from the game for 5 or 10 years and you're dropping him back down into the sport like we've seen with Mac Brown, who was gone for 5 or 6 years, and now Bill Belichick. That's a whole different deal. He's gone through this transition of going into the transfer portal and NIL. Now, not to the big time level of West Virginia, but he's still lived in the same world. He's gone through this transition, so none of this is a shock to him. He's lived it for the last few years and continued to be a college football coach. So he's right in the flow of all this.
Yeah, I like the Bill Belichick hire by North Carolina, but I don't know how his NFL is going to translate over to college. But I do know that when he walks into a recruit's house and he's got 8 Super Bowl rings, it kind of makes a big difference, right? And and Bill Belichick's in your house, so he's going to be able to get some really good business with some really top level talent. Now, will those result in him being able to sign them, and also will it result in play on the field for North Carolina? I don't know. With Rich Rod, though, you kind of know what you're getting. So that's kind of where I think Rich Rod's the better hire here, because you kind of already know that he can succeed at West Virginia. He can recruit West Virginia. He understands West Virginia, and so therefore, and he understands college football. And he's not been out of the fold for a while. So yes, I think Rich Rod's probably the better hire between the two schools. Although I do wish North Carolina luck, and I think Bill Belichick's a great hire for him. I just don't know how it's going to translate on the field.
Hey, Kuz, you mentioned that this may take a couple of years, but at the same time, as you mentioned with Cignetti and with a few other coaches out there, people are seeing this immediate turnaround, and you've got the transfer portal. So it's not like, okay, I'm stuck with a bad quarterback room. Oh, I just got a hotshot freshman, but he's going to need 1.5 years to get ready for his sophomore or junior season. So you can make immediate changes now and improve your roster. So don't you think, number one, people will be more expecting of that? And number two, that it is possible. So it should not necessarily be the standard that you give people no time and just, man, year one, you better be ready to roll at 10-2. But that there is a more reasonable expectation that you can get a program up and running. And this is not a horrible football program. It's not like he's walking into a disaster either.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think he's, even though Neil Brown wasn't winning football games at the rate he needed to for the standard that West Virginia has, the program itself as a whole is in a really good place. I mean, Neil Brown did things off the field to get that program in a good spot. The facilities are top notch. The academic side is top notch. the health and nutrition side, strength and conditioning, all of that has been top notch. He's done everything right except win games, right? So Rich Rod, all of that stuff, and to be honest, a lot of that stuff is the reason Rich Rod left. He wanted more and better facilities and all that, and they wouldn't give it to him at the time. Well, he has it now, right? So everything should be in place for him to compete. The only reason my expectations are tempered a little bit is because he coaches a different style. Rich Rod is a very, very tough coach. He expects you to, he's hard edge. That's the word he uses. That's his philosophy. And if you don't meet a certain standard from a toughness mentality, from work ethic, you're not going to play for him. And it just is what it is. Probably a little bit more so even than Neil Brown was. And I just don't, I don't think it's fair to expect every player on this West Virginia roster. Number one, a lot of them are not going to stay. And number two, I don't know that it's fair to expect all of them to be a fit, the ones that do stay. So it may take him a year to get the guys he needs. But That being said, maybe it won't. Maybe he can come in year one and win 8, 9, 10 games. I don't know. But the anti-Rich Rod people are obviously going to, if he doesn't win, they're going to say, well, we told you so. And then, of course, us that were pro Rich Rod are going to be like, well, give him another year. That's just, we're fans, right? We're fickle. And we're going to see our side of it. But I don't think 1 year is, expecting him to play for CFP in year one is going to be realistic. But you never know. But neither was Indiana making the CFP in year one either. So
exactly, it's not realistic. It shouldn't be expected, but we shouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Correct.
Not in that conference, especially.
Right.
Where it's topsy-turvy. Look at Arizona State.
Yeah, Arizona State was picked to finish last in the Big 12, and here they are finishing first. So, and West Virginia was picked to finish last year and finish fourth. It's a wide open conference. It's not like the SEC or Big Ten. It's a wide open conference, a lot like the Big East was, to an extent. There's a lot better teams in the Big 12 than there were in the Big East, obviously. But the Big East was always one of those things that was wide open, except for the years that Rich Rod was there at West Virginia, and that seems to be they would seem to beat. West Virginia kind of dominated the Big East in the Rich Rod years. So can that glory return to Morgantown? That's what we're all hoping to see. That's what we're all wishing for and stuff. But I'm going to get off here. I will be going live tonight. We're going to go live at 6. Shane has a couple of things he needs to do. So we're going to go live at 6 tonight on the West Virginia channel to talk about the Rich Rod hire.
Joey, appreciate you being here. West Virginia channel with Joey. They're going to be live at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. Joey, have a great day. Appreciate you jumping on with us. Coos, want to let everyone know where you are and when you're going live or producing any content next. But also want to give you the floor if there's anything that we've missed on this Rich Rod hire. The only thing I will say, and this is more of a historical perspective, doesn't apply to this specific situation, but I'm looking at Bill Walsh, looking at John Robinson. Those are the first two guys that come to mind because this just doesn't happen very often. Mac Brown would be the other one who ironically just got replaced today. All 3 occasions, the first run was exceptional by all measurements. The second run was okay. It was fine. It was decent, but it didn't come close to the first run by either one or any of those 3 coaches. And whether that's just you can't replicate the same magic, the same situation, the same environment, or you set such a high standard the first time that it's really not reasonable to think that you can duplicate that, is just my thought from a historical standpoint.
No, you're right, Mark. And to be honest, up until recently, I was against bringing Rich Rod back, to be honest, for that reason. But when you look at the candidate pool that was out there, very few of them had head coaching experience or even experience at the P4 level in some cases, if it was a coordinator. I just felt like the timing of this thing is what to me made it a fit. West Virginia has been in such a a lull, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, for so many years, man. We need something. We need flashy. We need substance, along with that flashiness. Don't get me wrong, but I just felt like now was the time. And it's been 17 years, and like you said, it's not like he's not been coaching. But I also want to point to people like Bill Snyder, who had a successful second run at Kansas State. And you know, if you look at Mike Brown's tenure, it wasn't a disaster at North Carolina. You know,
How could
this
I
last
forget Bill
go-around.
Snyder? Absolutely. But he's another one. His first run, elite, what he did, I still think is one of the greatest, maybe the greatest coaching jobs in the history of college football. Folks, go back to the mid 80s and earlier at Kansas State football. Just look at the records. It's unbelievable how bad they were. And Bill Snyder was competing for national championships. It's unbelievable. But then he steps away for Ron Prince. He comes back and he elevates them again. Ron Prince did not do a good job, but not nearly to the extent, again, more in that 8-4 range when he came back. So there's a fourth example of not being able to replicate the first run of magic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's up for debate. I mean, Kansas State at 8-4 is not necessarily a dumpster fire.
No. But I'm saying the first time around, just look at Bill Snyder's records, his first run at Kansas State versus his second. They don't compare. Right. It's still really good, but it doesn't compare.
Yeah, and that is one fear I have. I mean, we as a fan base have to understand. We have to look at this in context, okay? The Big East he was playing in is not the Big 12 today. He's not playing UConn. He's not playing South Florida. No offense to those programs. And those programs were actually pretty good back then, to be honest. But they're not Utah. They're not Colorado. They're not, you know, today's Kansas State. So there also was only 8 teams in that conference, too. Let's not forget that. So they were playing 3 to 4 games a year, or a couple games a year anyway, against G5 teams, right, to get those 10, 11 wins. But it ain't. But just taking the wins and losses out of it. I mean, he coaches such an exciting style of football that we really haven't seen in Morgantown for a while. I mean, Neil Brown's teams were just a little blah, to be honest. And you know, there's just an excitement that Rich Rod brings, an edginess he brings that Neil didn't quite have, in my opinion. Just a totally different mindset. To me. I mean, West Virginia's a state. It's so unique. We have no pro teams, only have one Power 4 team. We're one of only 2 states, I think, that only have one Power 4 team in it. With Arkansas being the other, maybe Louisiana's another one, but there's not many of us out there.
Nebraska,
not many states. There's a handful of states that only have one Power 4 school in it. West Virginia's one of them, and it just means so much to the state. And it's, you know, we don't have a whole lot of high-level talent in the state as far as high school talent. You need to be able to recruit the culture of the state, and you need somebody that knows the culture of the state in order to do that effectively. And I think, I'm not saying you have to be from West Virginia, but you have to at least have a similar background, or at least embrace it to the point where you can relay it to kids when you're recruiting them, or in today's age, young men out of the portal. So, and I think Rich Rod brings it. I mean, he grew up not far from Morgantown. He went to West Virginia. He's coached at West Virginia. He knows what it takes to win at West Virginia. And I just think that, now was the time. And again, looking at the candidate pool, and, a couple of the candidates that were pretty high on the list fell off the board. So I think at the end of the day, you circle around and who's standing, and that's Rich Rodriguez. And I think it just makes sense from that regard. But the arguments are fair that, rehashing history is not always successful. So hats off to Ren Baker for taking this big risk, because, his legacy at West Virginia, despite all the great things he's done, this is going to be his legacy, whether we like it or not. And so he's taking a huge risk here by doing this. So got to give him props for that.
And again,
as far as where
I'm sorry, go ahead, Coos.
I was just going to say, you'd ask where you can find my work. I'm at Coos's Corner on YouTube. Also cover, if anybody enjoys basketball, I have a channel called Hoops from the Hills where I cover West Virginia basketball as well. But you can find me on Twitter at Coos206, and I have a website, coosescorner.com, where if you want to shoot me a message over there. But But those are the places you can find me and most of my work.
Thanks for showing up, Coos. Appreciate it. It's our guy, Coos's Corner. Check him out. And I'm bracing myself for George here. We're going to get to him in 2 seconds here. We want to remind everyone, this is a late announcement. This is just off the cuff, but Leanne Herring and myself have decided, with the transfer portal being what it is, news every day, going crazy, we're going to be here every day, Monday through Friday, live at noon Eastern time. We call it On the Move because everybody's on the move. So we got to be on the move, recruiting and transfer portal update live at noon Eastern time. So we'll be back at noon Eastern time. All right. I'm going to brace myself for George. George, we love you, but I just had to go to Joey. I had to go to Coos first. This is about Bill Belichick going to North Carolina. This is about Rich Rodriguez to West Virginia. Had to get those two expert opinions in. Who knows what George is bringing to the table here? George, what's going on?
It's some crazy stuff going on. I don't blame you. You have to get to it.
So what you got for me?
Some good shit, man. This is the most fun I've ever had in my life with college football. I know the Gators should have got in. We should have been the 12th seed, but, I'm going to let that go. But this is the most fun I've ever had. How about you?
This is the most fun because of the Gators? Because of the 12-team playoff?
No, because of Clemson winning that game in the last 8 seconds. That was good shit.
That was phenomenal.
Dabo Sweeney proving you don't need the transfer portal. We will develop our players from scratch. I love that shit, man. I hope he wins the whole thing this year.
Oh, wouldn't that be something?
Wouldn't it be?
Nobody's expecting.
I know.
They've got the worst odds of any team in the field.
Vegas would lose like $3 trillion, yeah. I'm going to cheer for Clemson since they didn't let the Gators slide in at number 12.
You and me, George. You convinced me. I'm rooting for Dabo and Clemson.
Every play that DJ Lagway doesn't play is a loss to college football fans everywhere.
Well, it's funny because you kind of had the last laugh when it came to all of this Florida business because everybody made fun of you and your Gators the entire offseason, that this was going to be a dumpster fire and it's horrible and you guys are a joke. And look at your schedule. And they got into the season and obviously Miami laid you to waste and Texas A&M. So it looked like it was headed that way. And then
that was an accident.
Billy Napier sticks around and DJ gets the job and you guys are a respectable football team all of a sudden.
Hey, you've been watching college football a long time like I have. I've been watching it since 63 or something. But you have to admit DJ Lagway is the best quarterback you've ever seen in the history of the multiverse.
No question. He is number one.
Absolutely.
Ranking DJ Lagway as the all-time greatest college football quarterback.
Yeah.
Not Vince Young, not Michael Vick.
Listen.
Not Cam Newton.
He is so good that there is nobody in the number 2 spot. It goes to number 3 after him. That's how good he is.
It's kind of like when I rank my favorite musical artists of all time. I put somebody at number 1 and then I say it really doesn't matter after that.
If it was bread, you're correct. Was it bread? I would give everything I owned. I'd give up my life. Yeah. You're an old timer, Mark.
I am an old timer. Just don't let that get out there.
So can I ask you a question?
Of course. That's why I'm here.
What's going on at Ohio State in the athletic department, the football team? What's really going on?
They got a playoff game. They're getting ready for a playoff game. What do you mean what's going on? Everything's fine.
Thank you. I feel better now.
They're either going to win some playoff games or they're going to fire their coach.
In all honesty, you could win the national championship this year and just get it over with, right? Like tell everybody shut up. You know,
That could happen. That could
it
happen.
could. It could. You have like 52 5-star players. I'm sure you're a good.
Well, they've got a chance. They got a tough road to hoe, though. I don't know if they can do it.
Clemson can do it. Florida can do it. All kind of teams can do it. Can your team do it? And what is the problem with Ryan Day, man? I mean, my God, at some point you're just gonna have to fire him, you know?
Well, at some point, if he doesn't win a championship,
Yeah.
he's going to get fired.
Yeah. Winning 10 games a year at some point gets you fired, you know?
I don't think it gets you fired anywhere except Ohio State. I haven't seen that anywhere else.
It got Mark Richt fired twice.
Okay, well that's a good point. Did take
Yeah.
15 years though.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Mark Richt got fired, and when I was asked about Mark Richt getting fired, I said, Mark Richt's an excellent football coach, but hey, if you're going to make top 3 or 4 money in the country, you got to deliver championships at some point. And they just decided top 10's not good enough. But that's a good point. Mark Richt did get fired for winning 10 football games a year. Yes, he did.
Right. And he is head and shoulders above Ryan Day. Ryan Day is just like some guy that inherited Urban Meyer's football team, you know?
Okay. Well, if that's your argument, you might have a case there. But if you're talking about record, Mark Richt is not performing at the level of Ryan Day.
So when you're all alone at night and you're thinking about football, can you picture, do you think Ryan Day is some kind of a football genius sitting with his coaches and players late at night discussing game plans? And I think he seems more like an actor that was put there to pretend he was the football coach, you know?
Well, I want to certainly let people know that it might be a surprise to some, but when I'm alone or whatever, the thoughts about football are rare. So
good point.
We do enough football thinking here and when I have to.
Mark, I retired in the year 2000. It's 2024 now, right?
Yes.
No matter whatever happens in my life, no one can take away that I haven't worked one day in 24 years unless I felt like it for fun, you know?
Well,
isn't that great? Isn't that what we all aspire to? I love work. I just don't like to do it for money, like be forced to do it.
Many. Yes.
So, Mark, we all see the commercials on TV, like they show a dog that is starving and they show kids that are injured, and everybody says, send me $19.95 a month, $19.99, right? For as little as $19.99, you know? So I think that everybody that is a fan of Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, we should send you $19.99 a month. And I know that's a lot to ask, but we have a second tier plan for $16.99, and then we have the $3 plan, so everybody can get involved. You know, we're not exclusive.
I love that plan.
Yeah, because we don't need to be seeking corporate interest, like BlackRock to sponsor us or some shit. We should just do it ourselves.
Well, I got to say that I was running the accounting just last night, my big spreadsheet of the last 3 years of the Voice of College Football. It's not real pretty.
Wow. This is some shit, Mark. I can't even believe we're having this discussion.
Well, we're letting you go off here, George. This is your time.
Well, listen, this is what I would do. I give you my word. I mean, I'm not accepting any liability, but I give you my word. I know 3 or 4 things you can do at a roulette table every month. Now, you can't push it too far. You'll get kicked out of the casino. You follow me? But I know how we can get your net income up 30,000 a year or something. Just enough to cover cost, you know?
I like the previous plan better. Everyone chips in $19.99 a month.
Yeah. Listen, people will do it for a dog. Do you think they won't do it for you? Of course they'll do it for you.
A dog they don't even know.
You see it on TV. They're like, send us $19.95 and we won't kill this dog. Or whatever the hell they said. Something like that. Send us 20 months or this dog will die. But we're talking about a real man. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All rights reserved. Copyright.
George, I would have taken your call much sooner had I known what your mission was.
I'm just so upset. I can't believe Coke hasn't fucking sponsored you yet.
Well, we're going to start working on that this off season. We're going to.
I just want to get it over with, man. Like, give me $150,000 a year, and you're my sponsor. I quit. I'll sit there with an empty can of Coke with distilled water in it and drink it all day, or maybe Sprite. Who knows? Dr. Pepper. What about Dr. Pepper? Hey, Dr. Pepper's looking for people. Dr. Pepper is looking for channels to coerce.
I like it.
Can you believe that?
Which, by the way, since you're on the topic, I will note to everyone down on the ticker there, and I should have done this a long time ago, we are scrolling the names of everyone who is a member here at the Voice of College Football, whether that be on Patreon or
mind-boggling.
So we're needing to recognize these folks a little bit more, and I apologize when.
Hey, listen, your chat section is the shit, man. There's nothing like it. It's the only one in college football.
It's a good bunch of people. It is a good bunch of people. Well, George, we are coming back at noon, so I'm going to take a couple hours. Well, I'm not going to take them off. You can be sure of that, but we're going to take a couple hours here. So do you have a parting shot for anyone?
Yes. You have 30 seconds. I already have my answer. I got to hear yours first, but you have 30 seconds to answer, okay? Who will win the national championship this year?
Oh. Well, if I play it the way I have in the past, which my national championship prediction at the beginning of the year was Ohio State over Alabama in the national championship game.
That was a good pick. That was a good pick.
So as long as my team's still alive, I'm going to pick whatever team I picked in the preseason. For anybody out there that's going to criticize that prediction, no, I'm not picking Ohio State to win national championships every year. I haven't picked them to win one in like 7 or 8 years. So it's not the pick I make every year.
Right.
That was the pick this year. And so I'll stay with it. Although I got to say, going into this little tournament, I really favor Oregon and Texas as being the best teams.
All right.
Ohio State is not playing the best based on
I agree. I agree 100%. So you want my pick now?
Of course.
Tennessee. I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah. Mark, please pray for this to happen. It would just upset all of college football. Everyone will have to go back to the drawing board, you know? Yeah. Let Tennessee get in there. That's the reason you have more than 4 teams. Yeah. I love them dudes. Plus, half their state just got wiped out by a hurricane.
Yes.
Yeah. Normally, hurricanes don't apply to West Virginia and Tennessee, but it happened this year. So, cheer for Tennessee.
Okay.
I hope they beat everybody's ass.
Okay. I
hope they play Ohio State and they kick a field goal to win with 4 seconds left. That would be good.
Oh, boy. I don't know if Ryan Day would make it off the field if that happens.
I know. And they plant their flag. Somebody goes to prison.
Plant the flag. That would be tremendous. That's what I want to see. If Tennessee wins this game, I want to see another plant flagging.
Right. And the head coach goes to prison for 6 months, but he gets out with good behavior in 3 months.
That would be beautiful.
I know.
All right.
All right.
George,
I love you guys
great to
more.
see you.
Bye.
That's the incomparable George right there. We'll be back at noon Eastern time, right there. Leanne Herring and myself, we're going to do this every day during the transfer portal cycle, every day with an update. Also, Adam Lamparello will tell you, pick this book up. You'll love it. You're a college football junkie. You will love it. I won't give you the long sales pitch today. Disputed National Champions. It's not just a history book. No, it's about the future as well. Disputed National Champions, great run through the 1990s, and again, beyond that. Appreciate you being here, the voice of college football. You can look it up on Amazon. You can grab the link. It's in the description section of this video and every video. We will see you at noon Eastern. It's only a little over 2 hours away. Less than that. We'll see you.